Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Flourish. Just here to provide you with my interview of a fellow teacher or teacher interview. As you can see on my screen, I have some questions that I've developed. I'm lucky enough to have Todd Karich with me today, who is a teacher, veteran teacher of 23 years, or on his 23rd year teaching. About ready to share some answers with you, but I just want to go through a couple things up front that he put some thoughts on paper first, but we'll also do some live interview questions as well. So I asked him the question about what made him want to become a teacher, and I just wanted to share this quote because I thought it was cool. So I'm not even letting him read it. I'm reading it. As Bob Dylan once said, "You're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed, you're going to have to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. To be simple, he wants to serve the Lord." So he's doing some teaching, giving back to some people, which is a pretty cool thing. So, as I said before, I'm lucky enough to be here with him. So I'm going to turn the camera a little bit. I don't know if you can see him a little bit, kind of, maybe. He's kind of in there, somewhere over there. There he is. Kind of, we're kind of a little bit both on camera. There you are. Perfect. So, Coach or Todd, what are some things that you have done or to have support as a teacher, and when have you not have support as a teacher? So things that you've done that you've had support of, and when have you not had support as a teacher?
Well, I'll give a big shout out here to St. Mary's. Probably the most important time in my career as an educator is when I participated in the Apple Valley 8 learning community. It was for my master's program that began in
Good memory.
2006. Yeah. And we met at the School of Environmental Studies, and I can honestly say, being in a cohort of learning, one weekend a month, and with the same group of teachers, well over, there was probably like 70, 80 of us in there. And it was something that was super helpful because I truly believe like the biggest support one gets in their careers from the collaborative relationships one has with their colleagues, and be able to work with people across different districts and get feedback, and being able to do it in an environment where it wasn't so much of the work day, to be able to sit back and reflect upon teaching and have some enriched conversations over what we should be doing in the room. That was very, very, very powerful. I would say the other powerful component of my career is when Farmington introduced the Farmington Alternative Teacher Professional Pay System, otherwise known as quality compensation. It very much increased our peer coaching program and allowed colleagues to jump into each other's rooms and watch each other and have some authentic conversations. And it was very much non-scripted forms of conversation that allowed us to all grow. And I think it created an environment of trust. And I think that's super important in education, that you have trust with colleagues. So those would be a couple of examples of things where I didn't feel had a lot of support. And then ultimately, I think a big challenge is always for everyone in the beginning of the career. I don't think we had a very strong mentorship program when I first started teaching. That goes in the couple of the different school districts I worked in. It's nobody's fault, but being a first, second year teacher, if there's not a lot of supports, I think that's improved drastically over the course of my career. I think the districts, and including my own, have done a fantastic job of introducing some different things. But ultimately, I think that's a struggle. And I think another big struggle is when we don't have the ability to meet with our colleagues during the day. I think it's important that we have time set up to discuss. And I think when we did not have what would be called, in this day and age, professional learning communities, and I know over the years,
PLCs.
yeah, I know it changes, but when those were introduced, before we had those, I think it was really hard to sit down and have conversations with colleagues. So having some time to be able to do that during the day, extremely important. And I think that improved, and I think it was really hard when we didn't have that time.
Excellent. Well, good answer. A lot of things to support, and a lot of things they're not support. But either way, I like the fact you talked about collaboration as a big piece for me, and QComp's a big thing too. It also is. It's one
Yeah.
of those things that most people think, oh, it's just extra money. You jump through the hoops, but it can also be beneficial when you're meeting with other teachers.
Oh,
So,
for sure.
well done. So, when you reflect on your teaching experience at this point, are you satisfied with what you have done? Explain yourself.
I think I would like to to quote a little Carol Dweck here. I want to have a growth mindset.
There we
So
go.
ultimately, like if we get fixed and we get satisfied, I think it allows our growth to stop. And I think one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed in my career is just coming and trying to get better at what we do every single day. So am I satisfied? I would say I'm very satisfied with the relationships over the years. I think a big important component for all teachers should be legacy. What are you hoping to accomplish by the time a career is said and done? And I have a little note on my podium in my room, and it's a constant reminder that sometimes students are never going to remember what I taught them, but they're always going to remember the way I treated them. And I think I would be satisfied knowing that some of the students that I've had to really use a higher level of discipline or accountability, I've heard back from years later, and they were very appreciative of some of the techniques used to essentially motivate and encourage them to continue on. And at the time, they may not have liked it, so it's reinforced at times. Sometimes when we make really hard decisions, when we think we may be being too hard on kids. I've had it reinforced to me that sometimes later on in life that they've come to understand that it was an important piece of them growing up in adolescence. So ultimately, though, I think we in our career, once we become stagnant, it's probably not a good thing. So we want to keep on trying to get better. And ultimately, I'd say I'm satisfied with the relationships, and I feel like kids in my specific content area of economics have more financial literacy. But I think there's always things we can do and I can do to get better.
Awesome. I like it. Good answer. Very in-depth. I love it. For me, assessment is one of those things that Phi Ed World sometimes we use, sometimes we don't. I like to use it. Sometimes people like to say the fitness testing is a huge component, which I think a fitness test can be very beneficial just to see if you've made strides. But for me, for assessment for you, it's a volume process of teaching everywhere. What do you feel is the best way to assess kids, and what's the best way you give them a chance to be successful? Is there ways you give them to be successful? I know we're getting short on time. I think this thing's close up 15 minutes. We can go over. We can always do another one too. So, but feel free to answer on assessment.
Well, I think assessment is probably the most complex thing in our profession, and I think it's the hardest thing for teachers to work with. I think it's the hardest thing for administrators to work with because there's so many different levels and layers that exist of it. Now, I remember way back when we were working on assessment, when I was doing my graduate work with St. Mary's, it was, there was an article I read. It was, I still recall because I use it to this day, and it's something that always stayed with me, using assessment as of and for learning. And one of the things I first started off when I first started teaching, I just used assessment as a check for understanding. But now I've figured out over the years that it's you can do it for learning as well. And what I mean by that is oftentimes some of the components you might simply have given a multiple choice quiz in my content area to check and see if there's understanding. But over the years, I've turned it into kids using cooperative activities to answer questions together, kids having to solve answers together, and using the assessment piece itself after you've checked for understanding as a means of going back and teaching new information. So as far as grading scales go, I have always had an issue with some of the traditional scales we've used. I've never quite understood why you have to receive, for example, 95% for an A. In our world, if you take a 10-question quiz and let's say a kid in a multiple choice format gets one wrong, like to me, they got 9 out of 10. That's outstanding. That's excellent. They've demonstrated that they've really understood the material. Yet from a GPA standpoint, because of the competitive system that exists revolving assessment, a kid might have an A minus. And I think ultimately over the years, I think once you assign a grade to something, learning stops. So I think we need to be creative with our assessments. I think they need to be done. I think kids need to have that. But you start worrying about grades, oftentimes the learning stops because kids are just going to be kind of doing their thing to get a grade and losing track of the more global perspective of what they should be doing in order to take something with them well after they're out of your class.
Satisfied. Interesting. They get satisfied and they don't want to climb the ladder anymore. They get to a certain point. One of my big life lessons in life is never go too line, always go above it. So let's just keep pushing that line. You put down here, talked about classroom management styles, what works best, what work doesn't. I know you put some good information here. We'll let Mr. Flourish read on that a little bit, but can you expand or elaborate on this a little bit? I know you talked about, says the most powerful form of feedback I received from this was individual and classroom discussions with learners after the first and second trimesters. And there's some more pieces to that, but what else can you tell us
Well,
about
that's
that?
a little bit of. I thought I'd throw that in there. That was from one of my last evaluations that I did. Like, and we use the Danielson framework where I'm at, and this specific domain. One of the areas I wanted to improve upon was figuring out a way to create further engagement with learners in the classroom. So, what I really started doing when I start classes, I'm a big, I'll date myself here, but I'm a big Alfie Cohen guy. When I start the year off, but a lot of community building, a lot of opportunities to make kids feel comfortable within the classroom. And I think engagement of learners, one of the things I've done over the course of my career, instead of me telling kids what they're going to learn, I want to engage them by letting them pick what they're going to learn. So, for example, in a U.S. history class, I'm going to ask kids what are some things they really want to know about. In an economics class with kids that are about to graduate from a public school, like what do you know about particular financial components of our world? What do you know about your own financial literacy? And so I'll do a lot of probing in the first couple of weeks of class. And what I'll do then is after I record down the responses I get from kids, from things that they're interested in learning in, I take those things and I find where they fit within my standards for the specific, curriculum we're talking about, whether, we're talking about the economic standards or the U.S. history standards. And I'll design my instructional delivery around the things that they want, and I'll
Okay.
set up things that they want. That's not something I did early on in my career. Early on in my career, it was like, I need to teach you this.
Evolved a little
No,
bit.
yeah,
It's
yeah. So
evolved.
now it's what do they want to know, and I think it bleeds well into your classroom management question, because I think when kids have ownership in a classroom, when they have ownership of their learning, it eliminates a lot of the distractions that we can have from a traditional classroom management standpoint. And kids ultimately, to simplify, when they feel they have a stake in the learning and they're a shareholder in it, I think they do quite well with it. And so that's something that I think has improved at the latter part of my career. And it took me a while to get there, but
Hey,
I'm
you're
getting
doing
there, and
great.
I'm still trying to get there.
I love it. I think we're going to probably finish up this. Well, there's a couple other questions in here. We talked about technology, which we've kind of already talked about, me and him and I personally, but and we've talked a little bit about here standards and how important those are. But I think the biggest thing I want you to finish with, if you don't mind, is talking a little bit about this. This is really good here. I know we got 3 minutes left here, so I'm gonna let you expand on this one. But it's what's that best lesson that you can give any teacher at this point in their career? Sometimes teachers are like, "What do I do? What's the best thing?" And I got a student teacher right now. I'm trying to figure out what's the best information I can provide one thing, and I tell them about building relationships every day. And how important that is for kids and how you can make a change and impact in their life. For you, what's the best lesson you can give any teacher as we try to finish up here in that 15-minute window here?
Well, I think you're spot on. I think relationships are going to be the cornerstone and at the heart of what we do. Like if you have relationships, it's going to be great. Now in a room with 36 kids, 4 times a day, I'm going to be honest. It's you get to a point where it's super hard to build relationships with all learners. It's really hard, and oftentimes you don't get the chance. At least I don't get the chance to get to the level and meet as many kids as I
Yeah,
want. But I would say to teachers, that's kind of when I gave you that type of response. Like we have to recognize that we can't be all things to all people. If we show up in a room and we're holding ourselves to the utmost standards of integrity that we can apply, we have to recognize that we're not going to be able to be all things to all people. And if we try to be all things to all people, I think that would probably speak to why we've seen such an exit from a profession in the first 5 years, outside of the salary suppression, of course, which I won't get into with you. But
you can go on for hours
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
we lose people because they ultimately struggle with that end of things, and I think they need to recognize that yeah, you can't be all things to all people, but you do what you can with what you have, and sometimes you may lack resources, or sometimes you may lack time, but in my area of content, we human wants are unlimited, but we have limited resources, and I think it's very much a part of education, and I think you need to recognize that you can't beat yourself up, that you're not going to be able to do every conceivable thing, and sometimes you're going to fail, and you have to be able to keep a growth mindset.
I
So to
love
speak.
it. Let's go. Well, that's a good way to finish. I appreciate your time. This guy over here is a legend in my right.
Cheers, a legend
little
in my
coffee.
own mind.
Yeah,
Legend in my own mind.
No, absolute legend.
Little Sunday morning breakfast coffee. Yes, of course.
It's wonderful. But either way, thanks for taking the time to listen to Coach Carriage here. He's an outstanding role model to me and a lot of people in life. So I'm lucky.
Thank you,
be
St.
part of it.
Mary's, for making teachers better. I think it's fantastic.
I think this is a great
love
way.
it.
Alyssa Simon's fantastic with Mr. Flourish, so we love that. Otherwise, have a great day. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk later. Thank you.